Something that I've noted as I've been playing through the PC Engine library is a downward trend in the games from Nihon Telenet. As it turns out, this is one of the very few times where there is a candid, behind-the-scenes interview with staff who were there. And even at the time, they were well aware that they were releasing bad games. They just didn't have the time or support that they needed to make good ones. Cosmic Fantasy 2 isn't the nadir of Nihon Telenet games, but we're getting close. Obviously, Cosmic Fantasy 2 is the sequel to Cosmic Fantasy. That RPG was released almost exactly 1 year before this one, and it was a decent enough RPG for 1990, featuring a spacecraft crash landing on a fantasy world. So Cosmic Fantasy 2 is going to be a standard sequel that polishes things up, expands the scope, and makes a better game, right? Let's talk about the US version! Cosmic Fantasy 2 was the first big release from Working Designs, a company that I've now talked about 4 times, and they released a total of 5 PC Engine games. Cosmic Fantasy 2 was going to be their big splash, the game that put them on the map. They didn't even change the title. In the US, it was Cosmic Fantasy 2, even though Cosmic Fantasy 1 wasn't released here. And I think at this point it's fair to give Working Designs a little bit more context. Because in 1992, it was still very difficult to localize Japanese games with this much text. Just the sheer quantity that had to be translated was a major hurdle for anyone who wanted to bring over an RPG or adventure game. On top of that, there were space limitations on cartridges, and Japanese developers in the 90s weren't really great about making their games' text routines flexible enough to handle other languages. In 1992, translating any RPG from Japanese to English was a major undertaking. So kudos to Working Designs for taking the leap and doing that with Cosmic Fantasy 2. Unfortunately, they chose to do it with Cosmic Fantasy 2. I'm going to say a lot of things about this game, and virtually none of them are Working Designs' fault. Well, not their fault beyond choosing this particular game to localize. You see, Cosmic Fantasy 2 is bad. Really bad. Bad enough that even through the limited time I had for recording, I still encountered and recognized several critical problems with the gameplay. Maybe the best way to demonstrate this is to just walk you through my play experience. So we start out with some very poorly acted cutscenes that introduce us to Vaughn and his childhood friend Laura, or Lorla if you're playing a different version. While you're running around the village, you can use button 1 to interact with people, and button 2 will bring up your menu. The menu has all of the standard RPG functions like casting magic, equipping items, using things, and checking out your stats. You can also get a map of the local area when you're wandering the outside world, and that's handy so you don't just walk past a town when you're someplace new. Inns seem to all be free to stay at, and you can save your game there. Also in villages are equipment shops and item shops. You start out with a spear and some clothes, but in the first town you can buy a shield and a butter knife, which has 1 more point of attack than your spear. Of course, the only way that you would know this is to buy it and equip it. So Vaughn automatically walks over to a nearby giant tree, where he reminisces about his even more poorly voice-acted childhood. But then there's an explosion in town and he has to go check it out. Not the town you came from, another town that they don't tell you about. Once you figure that out and find the other town, you'll discover that it has been destroyed. Not that it really seems to have distressed any of the people who live there, though. You find out from them that the town was destroyed by the Empire, because it's always the Empire that destroys your hometown. But they were looking for a missing princess, and it turns out that the princess is Vaughn's childhood friend Laura. So he needs to rush back to the first town to try to help her. But first, you're not going to survive 2 fights in the wilderness without some help. So you talk to the village chief and get 2 herbs. And then you talk to the village chief and get 2 herbs. and then you talk to the village chief and get 2 herbs. Until you advance the story again, you can just talk to him over and over again, and just keep piling up healing items. Now you actually need to do this, because in my first combat, I had to use 3 of those herbs, which fully restored my health, in order to survive. So let's talk about combat. You have the usual options of attack, magic, use an item, defend, run away. I never got run away to work when I selected it, but it's there. The way that combat works is everybody on one side of the battle takes their actions, and then everybody on the other side of the battle takes their actions. It doesn't mix the turn order up based on each monster and character's speed. It is one side, then the other. If you have more than one character in your party, you have to select which character will take an action, and then select that action. And then after they've completed that action, then you have to select the next character to take an action, and it just won't let you select somebody who's already taken an action. And you might think, well, this is a stupid way to implement combat with multiple people on your team. And yes it is. Which side, yours or the monsters, goes first does depend on your character's speed. So it only matters at the very outset of battle, because after that it just alternates. Until you're at about level 10, monsters are always going to be faster than you. So you are effectively getting surprised every combat. In any random battle, you'll be attacked by 2 to 4 monsters. All attacks always hit, and regardless of how high your armor gets, the minimum amount of damage is 1d4. That is a random quantity between 1 and 4. That is also the only damage I ever received from anything other than a boss. At level 1, you have 36 hit points, and you gain about 5 hit points per level. Statistically, if you are attacked by a group of 4 enemies, you will take 10 damage a turn. If it takes you 3 turns to destroy a single enemy in that combat, then statistically, you will receive about 75 points of damage across the entire combat. Since you are soaking up 30 enemy attacks over the course of the entire battle, it's very unlikely that the total would vary by more than 2 or 3 points. And that is why you need infinite herbs at the start. Now the good news here is that if you level up after combat, then your health and magic are fully restored. And you are going to level up very quickly early on. But you're still going to need to suck down herbs for your first 4 or 5 levels of combat, just to be able to survive. When Vaughn eventually gets back to town, it's under attack by monsters. And you know this because there's random encounters, not that you can see anything happening. There is one guy standing in front of your house, and when you talk to him, he's a boss. And this is one of the very few changes that Working Designs made to the game. They made this enemy tougher. In the original Japanese version, he'll just do the 1 to 4 minimum damage to you. In the US version, he does 10 damage to you. Just keep munching on herbs. After he's down, you discover that your friend's been kidnapped, rush to the harbor to save her, but then you have an unwinnable fight against an evil wizard, and have to go do the rest of the game. To follow her, you'll need to take some paths through some dungeons. And there's not much to say about these except that the already high encounter rate goes to absolutely absurd levels. Get ready to be attacked every couple of steps. Then get through to the second region, and you'll find a new city there which has new equipment for you. Special medallions that will protect you against certain types of damage like fire and water. There are no special damage types in the game. The medallions do nothing. But you'll probably want to stock up on antidotes before you go into the next region. That way when you're hit by status effects from the big spiders, you'll be ready for it. Cosmic Fantasy 2 has no status effects. It has items to cure status effects, but all they do is take up space in your inventory. While you're exploring that new city, you'll meet an apprentice sorcerer named Annie who will join your party until you reach the next continent. So before you explore, you'll want to get her equipped with her own stuff, of course. But maybe she could use some of the things you have left over in your inventory? Nope, sorry. Once something has been attached to a character, it cannot be removed. No passing inventory around. You have to consume it or sell it. And you might ask, how do you know what equipment in the shop Annie can use? And the answer to that is, all characters can use all equipment, though the manual lies and says that there are equipment restrictions. And of course, as an apprentice sorcerer, Annie can use magic. She has 4 spells available to her at first. She can restore hit points, heal poison, and paralyze enemies. Of course, poison doesn't exist. And if you want to cast the paralyze spell, it costs 50 magic. Annie starts with 59 magic points. So all of her magic, other than healing, which costs 10 magic points, is useless. By the way, if you need to know how much spells cost, don't bother checking the manual because it's not there. You have to cast it and find out. So we're finally on our way to the tunnel to the next continent, and you get to the steps, but nothing happens. Annie has a key to open the door to them, but you can walk back and forth on top of it. Nothing will occur. You can go into your inventory and use the key. Nothing happens. What you have to do is move onto the square that is the beginning of those steps downward, and then press button 1. That will cause you to use the key and lose it from your inventory. After that, I made my way through the second dungeon, out the other side where Annie left, where I got to the next town and finally stopped. I don't know what horrors awaited me further on in the game, but I am not in a rush to find out. Unfortunately, after this, I've got 3 more Cosmic Fantasy games to go, plus 1 additional disc. If you want to play Cosmic Fantasy 2 on modern hardware, there's a fairly recent re-release of the games, including a whole new translation of Cosmic Fantasy 2. But like I said, the fundamental flaws with this game were not the fault of working designs. If you're wondering what Japanese players think of Cosmic Fantasy 2, well, I found a lot of people who said it was a nostalgic favorite. Even as they were acknowledging all of the fundamental flaws, they were going, but the character designs were so good. Obviously, I felt that Cosmic Fantasy 2 is a disaster. It's not the worst RPG I've ever played, but I'd put it in the bottom 10%. For years, I heard people complain about Cosmic Fantasy 2, and I was going, well, how bad could it really be? Besides, I'm sure the problem is that working design screwed it up. And then playing it, I found out that no, it really is that bad. And for once, it wasn't working design's fault. This isn't a case of RPG standards shifting. This is incredibly mediocre by the standards of 1991. Cosmic Fantasy 2 is a truly awful game. You could play pretty much any other RPG on the PC Engine and have a better time.